Week 28. I'm speaking to you from the comfort of my office. Typically, I like to go outside, find a nice place, set my camera down, and then talk into the camera for a little while, but I really can't do that now. It's about 110, 120 degrees outside, depending on where you measure. The, the ground is really hot, and I think for the next couple of weeks, I'm gonna have to just stay inside for our recording sessions. In any case, last week, a lot of things got done. The biggest improvement or the biggest movement that took place last week was UI, specifically the initial onboarding experience for new users. In other words, the first-time user experience of onboarding, signing up, putting the email in, and then getting the OTP code up until the moment that you get into the dashboard, the page where you see all your guests. That's been heavily improved. And the inspiration came from, I suppose, an unusual source. Last week I listened to, just randomly, YouTube decided to show me this very successful young entrepreneur, and he was talking about sort of the success of a business or the success of a product. And the funny thing, I suppose it can be both good or bad. The funny conclusion that he has drawn over the last 10 or 15 years of his business career is the product is important, but the communication between you and your customers is even more important. And unfortunately, this type of communication has a dirty name called marketing. And he did a fantastic job in sort of convincing me specifically, or other audience members of his, that marketing is something that you really have to pay attention. And one of the funny examples that he drew was liquid death. For those of you who are not familiar, and I definitely wasn't familiar with liquid death before listening to this his podcast, his soliloquy, was liquid death is literally just water. And now they've diversified into some flavored water and other types of water, but in its core, it's just water, drinkable water, the stuff that you can get from your tap. And yet they command apparently a significant amount of sales because they managed to communicate their brand, the emotional sort of reaction, they managed to capture their audience's imagination. So people are willing to spend money on something that you can potentially get for free. And obviously, number one, I'm not a marketing whiz like that. Number two, I don't think that's where my value proposition for this app would be. I genuinely believe that this app could be very useful for people who run small and boutique restaurants. But I think I'm convinced that I need to give my users a good experience in terms of learning what the product is and onboarding the product. So that's where sort of the idea came from. And what I managed to do was before last week, the onboarding experience is a bit rough. There was not a lot of very nice error handling. And there is the UI is a bit clunky in terms of sign up and in terms of affordances, right? Like what your what your app user is supposed to do. It's a bit like, if they're engineers, they can probably figure out what to do. But if they're not, then they might not. So the focus was to sort of use a lot of the UI UX design best practices and apply them onto at least the initial flow of the app. And I'm pretty happy about this. I added animation, I added the logo, and I made the transition smooth. I made it look slick. I want to sort of convey the idea that this is crafted with love and attention, and it's not just something that's, put together sloppily by some random people on the internet. So that was it. And in terms of the technical details that took place last week, it was a lot of composed multi-platform work, and there was a little bit of the platform-specific work as well, because if you're dealing with Android-specific splash screen, loading animation, icons, any of those sort of UI, UX related stuff, you're gonna have to touch some platform specific code. So there's a lot of that too. But I think I'm at a pretty happy place, and I think the focus for next week or the next week or two would be on improving the user experience of some of the other screens. And I think that there's definitely a lot of improvement I can use on the main dashboard, the focus of the app, where the user would spend most of their time. And I think that that definitely deserves another look. And the other thing I was thinking about is yeah, at some point, perhaps not anytime soon, because I'm still in the sort of the gung ho implementing features phase and polishing stuff phase. I really need to get the testing working correctly. I mean, at this point, I think that there's some, well, I don't think I know that there's some rudimentary testing in the app, but coverage is abysmal. And I don't have any instrumented tests. And given the current state of the app that it hasn't been released to people, I'm not terribly concerned about regression risks. But before I hit publish on the App Store, I really need to get this down at some point. So if I have time in the next week or two, I might look into that a bit more to sort of round out my testing setup. But if not, I probably just focus on the UI work. So that's it for last week. I'll see you next week.